Here are two visionary political leaders, one Republican and one Democrat, who have solutions for America. In alphabetical order, they are former Congressman Will Hurd, a Republican from Texas, and Congressman Khanna, a Democrat from California. They have a lot in common. Both have a strong background in technology. They're both known for working across the aisle on bipartisan ideas. Hurd co-sponsored immigration legislation with his fellow Texan, Democrat Beto O'Rourke. Khanna has co-sponsored legislation with Republicans to bring more tech jobs to rural America. Best of all, both are the authors of stimulating new books that chart a course for America that is practical and optimistic, rather than partisan and negative. Hurd is the author of American Reboot, an idealist's guide to getting big things done. Khanna is the author of Dignity in a Digital Age, making tech work for all of us. They recently appeared at a forum for Simon & Schuster employees where they discussed what Americans, especially those in Congress, can do to improve the quality of life in the United States and the quality of government in Washington. So in other words, most Americans, no matter how much they think of their particular representative, and the polling shows that they do tend to think highly of their own representatives. They do not think very highly of the body of Congress. So could you give us one idea from your book that might make people think more highly of Congress? And I'll start with you, Ro.
Part of the problem, I think, is the challenge of what it means of becoming a multiracial, multi-ethnic democracy. What we're trying to do is very, very difficult. We're 60% white, non-Hispanic compared to Canada, England, Australia that are 85% white. And so you have a lot of people from very, very different backgrounds getting into Congress. I think one thing that would help is going to a district that is very different than yours and spending 2-3 days there, as I know Will did with Beto, I've done with Hal Rogers, not just for a photo op, but require it almost that members of Congress have to do this in a substantive way so that we're listening to each other as opposed to shouting at each other.
If you're a left-wing nut or a right-wing nut, you're not going to like my book, to be honest, because I'm not talking to those extreme edges, right? And both parties have it. And the political continuum is no longer a line. It's a horseshoe, right? And the edges are closer to each other than they are to the middle. And for me, one of the things that you got to change the incentive structures of people going to office. I was in a competitive seat, meaning that a Republican or a Democrat could win in November. But unfortunately, in about 92% of congressional seats, the decision is made in the primary. One, more people need to vote in primaries. Two, if the primaries were more competitive, then the incentive structure is actually to solve problems. And so you need to make sure that your elected officials are getting rewarded for solving problems and not just issuing political rhetoric.
Are there any obvious areas of opportunity for making legislative progress across the partisan divide? And Will, I'd like you to pick an issue that you think Democrats have got right, that you think there's opportunity for. And Ro, I'd like you to pick one that Republicans have got right.
Two separate questions. The one I got right, look, I think, Ro, you can correct me, I think it was called the Humanity Act or something like that, where it was like you can't discriminate when it comes to, to contracting in the federal government, right? Like my dad's black, my mom's white. They moved to South Texas in 1971. They were only able to buy a house in San Antonio. That was the only place that would sell to an interracial couple. Yeah, we shouldn't have that kind of crap going on in the federal government. That's really easy. I think I was only one of like 8 Republicans that voted for it when I was in office. But an area we can get something done. I think we can get something done on Dreamers. This was an initiative I was involved in intimately when I was in Congress. These are young men and women who have only known the United States of America as their home. This is actually an issue that Republican primary voters are supportive of and Democratic primary voters are supportive of. And instead of using this issue as a bludgeon to beat each other with, let's actually solve the problem and go beat our chest and say, hey, we fixed this problem.
There was a Republican who proposed recently that we hold China to the same emission standards as the United States. I mean, we have 15% emissions in global warming CO2. But Steve said, let's vote no on it. I said, why? I mean, obviously we ought to be holding China accountable. And I think there are some voices in the Republican Party, not all, that have been more clear-eyed about some of the policies in China where we can collaborate. I think it's good jobs in their communities. I mean, that when you talk about good jobs, when you talk about entrepreneurship, you take away a lot of the ideology. And my guess is that Will and I sat down, we'd probably come to a consensus on 70–80% of policies.
A lot of people are worried about the threats to democracy in America. Both of our authors offer solutions in their books. Khanna shows how a commitment to progressive capitalism and the dignity of workers can lift the lives of citizens. He provides a roadmap for spreading wealth to America's hometowns so that people don't have to leave their communities in search of jobs and property elsewhere. Hurd shows how public engagement and moderation can take us forward. He shines a light on an alarming statistic. In 2018, the average number of people voting in a contested primary, Republican or Democrat, was approximately 54,000 people, which means that the winning candidate only needed slightly more than 27,000 votes to prevail. The average size of a congressional district is 700,000 people, so only a fraction of the public votes in primaries, only 54,000 out of 700,000 per district. In their books, Will Hurd and Ro Khanna offer important ideas for the future of our country. Just as important is the example they're setting by being willing to engage with the other side, while also asking more voters to engage more actively in the electoral process. And that is the word according to Karp.